the Committee Report Number 9 on the 2017 national budget. Parliamentary status of the measure is that we're still in the period of interpellations. So for this morning and for today, we will be tackling the budgets of the Department of Information and Communications Technology, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Transportation Light Rail Transit Authority, the Philippine National Railways, the Subic Bay Metropolitan Authority, Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and the Department of National Defense. So for this morning, to present the budget for the Department of Information and Communications Technology and its attached agencies, I move that we recognize as the Vice Chairman of the Committee on Finance, Senator Sari Angara, to present the budget.
Senator Sani Angara is recognized to sponsor the budget of the Department of Information and Communication Technology and its attached agencies. Senator Angara.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished Majority Leader. Good morning po. Under the Senate Committee Report, the total budget for the ICT is 3,533,400,000, with 2,998,882,000 going to the Office of the Secretary, 370,035,000 going to the National Telecommunications Commission, 150,739,000 going to the National Privacy Commission, and 13,744,000 going to the Cybercrime Investigation and Coordination Center, or CICC. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Angara. The Majority Leader is recognized on the
Thank you,
period
Mr.
of
President. Will the distinguished sponsor yield to some questions?
Certainly, to the distinguished Majority Leader, who I'm amazed is so energetic at this time in the morning, considering we left at 1 a.m. yesterday.
The same goes with the distinguished sponsor, Mr. President.
I'm not as energetic as he is right now.
And likewise with the presiding officer, who was here since 9 o'clock in the morning yesterday. Well, by the way, if you notice, I still never faced the back. I am from the old school. I never turn my back on the presiding officer.
That is the proper parliamentary positioning, if I may say. Thank you, Senator Soto.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Let me proceed. We would like to concur with the vision of the National Telecommunications Commission that by 2020, we shall be a world-class regulatory agency able to lead the telecommunications and information sector as an engine for progress and development. And we are just 3 years away from the vision. How do you assess the level of realization of this vision? Are we near accomplishment or are we lagging behind?
The question is referring to the NTC.
The NTC vision.
Well, Chairperson Cordoba is here, so it will be a self-assessment, of course.
Yeah, well, we were given that last year. We would want to give them all the necessary help to be able to achieve that vision.
Well, I think if the measure, Mr. President, is if we are moving up in a lot of the rankings in the world, although the Philippines, as a general rule, is not ranking too high in terms of internet speed, in terms of other rankings by various industry associations or groups, there is an upward movement. So I think there is cause for encouragement, although at the same time realizing that there is still so much to do with respect to rolling out important infrastructure in terms of regulatory issues, Mr. President.
I will go to the issue of internet speed and the like later in a short while, Mr. President. In the meantime, so how does it look?
Yes, well, I'm shown the various international rankings and studies, And the Akamai is state of the internet report. The Philippines registered an average connection speed of 4.3 Mbps on fixed broadband. This was an improvement of 24% quarter on quarter and 54% year on year. This is what I mentioned. Although in general we're still quite low, there is an upward trajectory at the very least. And in terms of average connection speed of mobile internet, we were 6th in the Asian Pacific.
I was about to ask that. In Asia, how do we compare? Sixth
Yes,
in worldwide.
worldwide.
Sir, wala po kasing ranking worldwide in Asia Pacific po.
Ito, how about this one?
Sir, ano po ICT Index, Development Index?
Well, there's a different, it's not quite the exact same metric as I mentioned earlier, but there is an ITU, or the International Telecommunications Union, which measures a ICT development index, where the Philippines also rose by 7 ranks from 105th in 2010 to 98th in 2015. So again, this is within that upward trajectory we mentioned.
All right. So
Mr. President.
perhaps the answer to my question would be, we're inching up. Something to that effect. All right.
Yes, Mr. President.
Well, that brings me to your budget, the NTC's budget. It's less than approximately 30 million compared to the 2016 appropriation. What is this substantial decrease about? How will this reduction affect the achievement of the mandate? I understand it is 399, 475 last year, and now it is 370 million, 35,000. And I went over your targets for 2017, and it's exactly the same as your targets in 2016. So why is that so, and how will the reduction affect you?
Mr. President, the decline, the majority leader, distinguished majority leader, is correct. There is a 29 million approximately peso decline in the budget of the NTC. This difference represents a non-recurring capital outlay item, which is the purchase of benchmarking equipment, which is equipment that the Commission did not possess before, which will enable it to measure things like internet speed for mobile and fixed internet. I think this is in response to consumer demand regarding the issue where advertising is not quite, or performance is not quite up to advertising, because the advertising says a certain speed, but the consumers say that that speed is only attained at certain parts of the day or certain periods, and not for a sustained period, Mr. President.
Yeah, I understand they have a target broadband speed of 15 megabytes per second. Is that right? For downloading, and then 10 megabytes per second for uploading. Is that right? Yun yung target. Are we on target?
For 10, what I was told is 10 Mbps is the proposal, Mr. President.
Oh, are we near that? Are we there?
It's a 2-year target, Mr. President.
Okay,
Currently, we
so-
are at 8.5 on the average, Mr. President.
Yung sa mobile range.
So, baka naman next year, on target na.
Well, hopefully, we'll continue that upward trajectory, Mr. President, and attain those 2-year targets.
You mentioned something to this effect earlier. You have a capital outlay allocation of 81 million in 2016, meant for monitoring and inspection of radio stations and telecommunications facilities.
That's the one I mentioned in respect to benchmarking, Mr. President.
Okay, so did it somehow affect the internet speed? Monitor sila?
Nasa DBM po for procurement.
It's in the DBM for procurement, Mr. President, but hopefully they're confident it will affect.
Okay.
They're currently in the process of acquiring it.
So you have
Distinguished
yet to
colleague.
acquire Okay, last year, the NTC issued 2 memorandum circulars relative to the acceptable speeds for mobile and fixed line broadband. The said circulars set the minimum speed for both mobile and fixed broadband to 256 kilobytes per second. Pero di ba dial-up, broadband na uso ngayon, di ba dial-up internet speed yan? What is the reason for setting the minimum acceptable at 256? It's not even close to the global average speed of 17.5 megabytes per second.
That is just a baseline figure to define what is broadband, but it does not necessarily mean, according to the NTC, that that is the minimum acceptable.
Yun na nga, pero pag sinabi nyo minimum acceptable,
Yes.
tirahin kayo ng mga telcos.
Well,
Nila
perhaps
sila.
we could ask them to
Yeah.
put it in a different
Uh-huh.
terms so that it's clear that it's not, because you might have providers who
Oo.
will take that understanding.
Oh,
I agree
the-
with the distinguished majority leader that
Yes, the
it could cause some
age-old-
confusion.
The
Yeah.
age-old phrase, pwede na yan.
They said they are amenable to
Alright.
correcting or amending the
Alright.
language, Mr. President.
What is the level of compliance of the telcos on this, or the internet service providers with these two circulars? May mga violators ba? Sabagay, baba nito. Hindi naman sila.
The latest is October. The latest is October 2015, 2016. Well, we have figures here which I can
No,
give
sige
to
nga.
the-
I was gonna ask that. Based on your tests and monitoring, what are the internet speeds of telcos and other internet service providers
tinatanong niya.
that are given to us, the consumers?
Well, they right now they don't measure the speed because they're still acquiring that equipment, Mr. President. But they said the speed would depend on the plan of the consumer. But they have measurements of tests conducted from June 2016 to October 2016 regarding compliance with the average download speed. So for June, for example, Bayantel is 91% compliant, Globe is 77% compliant, PLDT is 99% compliant, Sky Cable is 78% compliant. For later, just to illustrate, for October, Bayantel is 66% compliant, Globe is 71% compliant, PLDT is 85% compliant, Sky Cable is 49% compliant. These are examples. I can hand it to the
Yes, please.
distinguished majority leader.
Yes, please. Because according to the latest report of Akamai, an American content delivery network and cloud services providers, I think they're based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The average internet speed in the Philippines, according to them, is at 3.5 megabytes as of the first quarter of 2016, which is way below our target of broadband speed.
Sa mobile is 8.5.
That's for fixed lines, Mr. President. And but it's a little bit faster for mobile.
So would you say that, well, I don't think I can ask you that question of whether we have attained it already, because as you said, you're still acquiring the equipment. Perhaps the new Secretary of the DICT can pull some strings so that DBM and the rest would be aiding the NTC. Anyway,
Well, if I may just place on the record, Mr. President, distinguished majority leader, the equipment will certainly help, but also the proposed broadband network would also help increasing speeds and penetration. And they plan to have a telecom summit in January, Mr. President, to address all of these concerns, where they will talk to stakeholders and consumers, among others.
yes, just to remind the NTC, one of its functions is to make sure that consumer welfare and protection is at the utmost. No? Okay. I understand that an open competition in the telecoms industry would aid in lowering of fees as well as improvement of services of the telcos. Are there new entrants in the telecommunications industry this year? Or in the coming years? Are you expecting any new telcos to come in?
Three telcos who are requesting for the assignment of the frequencies available so that they can be the third tier.
There are, according to the NTC, Mr. President, there are at least 3 applicants for the remaining frequencies. So that would be an application to become the third telco, Mr. President.
There was
For
a...
mobile
Uh-huh.
tel.
Okay, yes.
Ilan?
Sa fixed mo, may ng players sa fixed.
Well, they should hurry up because I understand the franchise of Smart and the franchise of Globe are expiring.
Yeah.
They may not be renewed.
It was almost renewed, I remember.
Huh?
It was almost renewed
Oh.
sometime after you were renewed your mandate, distinguished majority leader.
Unfortunately, I was then acting minority leader. That's why it was
That's
not renewed. I wanted to ask a lot of questions, but I was not given the opportunity. But anyway, we probably will have this opportunity in the 17th Congress. Now, I've read in the report of the LBRMO that one of the accomplishments of NTC this year is the information drive against tech scam and tech spam.
Down ba?
Ano itong specific project of the agency that you implemented in this drive? And how is our success rate? Because parang may mga naririnig, may mga natatanggap pa rin yata kami mga tech scam eh.
Number of scams. Well, according to the NTC, the incidence of tech scams is now lower, and I think consumers are better prepared to react to these kinds of tech scams.
We coordinate with KBP for free radio plugs at saka po yung television plugs also meron din.
The NTC has been coordinating with the KBP for greater dissemination of plugs warning about these tech scams, Mr. President.
Meron po sir, and yun po
Oh,
sa text po, nagpapadala po ng text.
I remember that. Last year you said the kapisanan ng mga broadcasters will be giving you free airtime.
Yes sir, meron.
Well, I haven't seen this commercial. Saan nyo na ilalagay itong mga advertisements na to?
Kailan lumabas? Lumalabas ba
May
ngayon
list
or
po sila.
before?
Before po sir, mga early part of this year or latter part.
It was early part of this year and latter part of last year,
We
Mr.
have-
President.
We have the list sir of yung po mga lumabas. For example, in
A lot of them were on radio, on DZBB, DWLS.
Sa television,
Meron din pong sa GMA at
ano,
saka sa GNTV ho.
based on a Pulse Asia survey, when you ask the people how do they get their information, 80% say television. Around 11% would say radio. And about 2% will say social media. And then
Can you say that again, Mr. Majority Leader?
80% would get their information through television or would rely on television. That was the survey. 11% radio, 2% social media. I think 3% or 5% newspapers. Something to that effect. I might be missing 1 or 2 percentages there, but that's more or less that's the. Those are the figures of the survey. So I suggest that you go television because may I remind Secretary Salalima, and I'm sure he can do something about this. There is a ano ba ito, law or
sa PA po.
there is an executive order that gives the government free airtime on television for advertisements.
The majority leader is correct. It's 1 hour to the government.
Oh, yun, 1 hour to the government
They,
for
they're
every
hoping-
day.
Their ambition is to be on Eat Bulaga, Mr. President.
Pwede yun.
Yes.
Pwede yun. But I
But
said,
they cannot, because there's so many sponsors, they're not able to
pwede yun.
penetrate, Mr.
Pwede
President.
yun, mura lang kami. Yes, we will do that. We can provide for that. But especially in the evening, yung mga teleserye.
Prime time, during
Prime time, oo. Dapat makapasok kayo doon. What's 30 seconds to these television stations, ha? Laking bagay po yun, eh.
Yes, we agree, Mr. President.
Oo. All right. Are there further efforts strengthening against tech scams and tech spams? Kasi alam mo, related dito yung pinipilit kong SIM card registration. I have discussed this extensively with Secretary Salalima a number of times.
Yes, it's a continuing effort on their part, Mr. President.
And what does the NTC think of the SIM card registration?
We agree with the latest bill proposed by Senator.
They said they agree with your latest bill, Mr. President, distinguished
All
majority
right.
leader.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Dapat dagdagan ng budget nyo pag gano'n.
We will welcome the interjection at the proper time, Mr.
Oh,
President.
but you're collecting, Teka. Part of your regulatory and licensing functions is to generate income through collection of some fees.
4.3 billion.
For 2016, the Commission expects to collect 4.8 billion. However, as of June 30, based on the reports I got, only 39% of its prospective revenue has been collected by the agency. Oh, sayang to. What is the percentage of collection now as of today?
4.8 ang target.
They have now collected 4,616
That's good
million
news.
as of November 15, 2016.
Oh, so
Mr.
you're
President.
almost
They are more or less on
100%.
target. They're more or
Very
less on
good.
target, Mr. President.
Very good.
Last push na namin.
But why is there such a jump? Or what happened in the past that prevented you from collecting the fees on time?
Yung sinasabi
Hindi kasi
niya.
boss, ang pinaka-biggest payment is happens September.
Why?
Because that's when the telcos and the broadcasters pay their spectrum users fee and their television regulatory.
They say that the biggest influx of fees happens in September, Mr. President. That is when the telcos pay their spectrum user fees, among others.
Okay. Ito.
And this is an annual
Annual, yes, Mr.
payment,
President. Yes, Mr.
and they
President.
pay in September.
September is the bulk, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Ang deadline po is last day of September.
Thank you, Senator Soto.
All right, thank you, sir. Now, can you give us an update on the COA audit report in relation to the fees totaling 2.2 billion remain outstanding despite the issuance of your office order? O, nakakolekta na ba ito?
Yung pong cases, most of those are pending before the Supreme Court. So, kasi po, yun po yung mga fees na kine-question ng mga yung pong sinisingil namin. We won in the Court of Appeals.
Several of these, the claims constituting this amount mentioned by the distinguished majority leader are pending in the Supreme Court, according to the NTC chair. They won in the Court of Appeals, but these were appealed by the payors in the Supreme Court.
How much of it kaya ang still part of the case?
I'm sorry, Mr. President.
Mga magkano pa kaya yung part ng mga nakapending sa SC?
They are retrieving the figures, distinguished majority leader, Mr. President. Approximate lang. They approximate at 80%, and they're willing to submit to you the details, Mr.
Okay.
President.
All right, very good, thank you. Now, based on the data that you have submitted also, as of June 30, 2016, the 478 million of the 490 million of your budget has been released. However, I understand only 32% has been obligated. What is the utilization rate of NTC? Ano ang problema dito? Or as of today ba, utilized na?
The financial officers of the NTC are currently having a presidential debate on the
85%.
figure, Mr. President.
85% na raw.
It's around 85%,
Okay.
Mr. President.
All right. Medyo late na yung figures na nakuha ko. Now, let me focus now on the questions of the power of the NTC to approve and disapprove consolidation of mergers. No? Under EO 205, which was promulgated in 1987, and EO 436, issued in 1997, the NTC is authorized to issue a certificate of authority of operation of cable antenna television, or CAT-TV, CAT-TV system in the Philippines to any Filipino citizen or corporation or cooperative.
Ito po yung kasi po yung cable.
Although some of them have applied for legislative franchise in 1995. So far, how many certificates of authority or provisional authority to operate cable TV have been issued by NTC from 1987 to the present time?
Over 1,000 have been issued according to the
Over
NTC,
1,000.
Mr. President.
How many of these cable TV companies are currently operating in the country today with authority from the Commission?
822. Ang mag-operate po siguro sir, mga 900.
Around 900, Mr. President, approximately.
Ito pong, okay, mga 900 operating. Ito bang certificate of authority or provisional authority nyo? Does it include a provision requiring its approval before the lease, transfer, sale, or merger of all these cable TV companies? Meron ba kayong ganon? You do require approval? Huh?
It does, Mr. President.
Well, okay. I ask this because in the legislative franchises that Congress grant, we always put in a provision to protect the public from monopolies that may be detrimental to public interest, no? And we want to make sure that the NTC has a similar provision in your certificate of authority. Kasi nga, so you do have the same. Okay, good.
Yes, Mr. President.
Also, the Commonwealth Act of 146, Commonwealth Act of 146, the Public Service Act, it grants to the NTC the power to approve such mergers, transfers, and consolidation of property, franchises, and rights with any other public service. Gaano katanda na itong Public Service Act?
1936, so it's
Commonwealth
quite young,
Act.
Mr. President.
Commonwealth Act of number 146 eh. Grabe.
Penalties for violation.
I think under that law, they're supposed to issue franchises to ice plants.
Yes, Mr. President, that's
Oo,
correct.
yeah, correct.
It's a public utility.
Oo.
Penalties for
Maybe it's about time that we amend that Public Service Act. It is
I
so
Precisely.
agree completely, Mr. President.
Precisely,
Distinguished
Mr.
Majority
President,
Leader.
let us call the attention of the chairman of the Committee on Public Services
Yes.
to look into the matter, and perhaps we can make representations with the House of Representatives
Yes, I agree,
to
Distinguished Majority
completely
Leader.
review.
I was told it is so updated that the violations of the Act merit a penalty of 200 pesos.
That's right, yeah.
Grabe, ah. Isn't that the same act that there is an action that you need to ask permission from the President of the United States? Yun yata yun eh.
They're
Oh.
researching that, but there is a bill in the House of Representatives to update or replace
Oh, good.
amend the Public Service
Tayo
Act,
ng
Mr.
kopya.
President.
Let's have a copy and perhaps review it and put in our own. All right, now. So yung pa rin ang basis ng power ninyo for mergers, franchises, Kasi I understand that there's so many cable television networks that are wala namang franchise. Eh. Yung Sky Cable, walang franchise, ano? Meron na?
According
Franchise
to
or authority?
May franchise po sila before. And then,
Before.
Yes, sir.
When will it expire?
Sky Cable.
1995.
Sky Cable. When does it expire? The
25
question
years.
is 25 years from 1995, so that
Wah,
is
25
2020,
to
March
15.
30, 2020, Mr. President.
2020. Senator Drilon will still be here. Alright. So I'm correct in saying that it's within the powers and the functions of the Commission to review whether a merger, consolidation, or transfer of assets or rights from one cable company to another or any other public service company or entity, no? Di ba? It's within your power. Especially if it's detrimental to public interest because it may constitute a monopoly, you know, in a commercial mass media. Okay. Okay, include natin yan sa review natin. So it's correct to say that this merger or sale needs an express and prior approval. Prior approval of the NTC.
Yes, Mr. President.
And also the prior approval of Congress.
Cable po kasi sir. Wala.
If I recall, if that is a standard
Not in the
provision.
case of the cable.
Yun na nga eh. See, Mr.
Because
President.
it's not a legislative franchise, Mr. President.
Ah.
But I know that in the case of legislative franchises, it is
Pag
required.
legislative franchise,
Yes.
pero yung
All
authority
sale
to
or
operate,
transfer of interest requires.
wala tayong say. Or
If it
sale
is
of
on
transfer,
cable.
ha? So,
Because
I
it is
have
the-
read in, tell me if the Commission has actively performed this particular duty, because I have read news reports that there has been a merger and consolidation of several cable TV companies with other media companies. So that we may know, we may now have a big behemoth cable company that is must be reviewed by NTC in order to ensure that it's prohibited monopoly.
Yes, Mr.
Meron ba?
Meron,
Meron?
meron po kami mga approve. We can submit it to.
They will submit to you all approvals of sales,
So tama, no?
Mr.
Ha?
President.
Oh, because I'm referring to Central Cat TV, Sky Cable, the Philippine Home Cable Holdings, and Filipino Cable Corporation, and their parent company, Ben Press. I think they entered into a master consolidation agreement with PLDT and MediaQuest Holdings. Ang laki nito.
Just for the education of the chair, Mr. Majority Leader, if it is a cable TV company, they do not pass through Congress to secure a legislative franchise.
No,
Is that-
no, Mr.
No, eh.
President.
No, I think they should.
That's why I'm asking what and how is that justified? Why
Because of
is,
the 1936 Act.
It's the EO 205, which is regulating the operation of cable antenna television, CAT TV systems in the Philippines, which was signed by President Cory Aquino on June 30, 1987, when she still had legislative powers.
Pero the
Mr.
basis
President.
of that executive order is the old Public Service
That's
Act.
correct, Mr. President.
so on cable television can just proceed on the franchise granted by the National Telecommunications Commission.
Hindi nga franchise ang binibigay nila eh. Franchise pa, hindi. Letter of, parang authority.
It is called an
Authority to
authority rather than a franchise, Mr. President.
Authority to operate.
Oo. Well, as long as the NTC is diligent, no, but
Yeah,
I
but-
think we have to review this.
Yeah,
I think we have to come up with the legislation, Mr. President.
okay.
All right. So what is the status of the master consolidation agreement between these big companies? PLDT, MediaQuest, Vision, Unilink, Sky Vision, and Unilink. What is the status? Have you approved the merger or consolidation of these big companies? Have you approved it already? Or-
Which companies, Mr.
Ito,
President, in
itong
particular?
Central KTV, Sky Cable, Philippine Home Cable Holdings, at saka yung PLDT Media Quest, and consolidate their
It's not
cable
been-
TV ownership rights and interest in Skyvision and Unilink Cable.
It's not been approved because there's an opposition filed by GMA, Mr. President.
Ah, I see. There was a petition filed by the GMA. Opposition filed sa inyo o sa Supreme Court? Sa inyo. Oh. So it's with the NTC now. Wala pa status, sir. You're reviewing the petition.
They are reviewing it, Mr. President.
So, after public hearing, nagpa-public hearing kayo bago nyo, ano, okay.
Yes, Mr. President.
Hypothetically, what is the legal effect if the commission does not give its approval or authority for merger or consolidation? Can the companies insist on implementing their consolidation without the NTC's approval?
They cannot do that, Mr. President, legally, and they have to remain separate entities.
What does the Secretary of the ICT think? They cannot, ano? Or will they? Because the Secretary was a long time and successful practitioner in this field.
Yes, he seconds the opinion of the
All right.
Commission,
All
Mr.
right, I
President.
will take that. Thank you very much. Tama ito, 2020. Cat TV granted a 25-year franchise. Oh, pero may nag-apply ng franchise eh, no? Merong mga cable television na nag-apply ng franchise.
Legislative franchise, Mr.
Oh,
President?
legislative franchise. Merong hindi.
Yes, Mr. President, there are.
Oh.
Although according to them, it's not really required.
Kasi sa legislative franchise, Mr. President, ito nalalagay natin to eh. We have a provision there. Siguro kaya tayo iniilagan nila eh. Iniiwasan tayo eh. Oh. The grantee cannot, quote, cannot merge with any corporation or entity without the prior approval of Congress of the Philippines. Neither shall the controlling interest of the grantee be transferred, whether in whole or in part, whether simultaneously or contemporaneously, to any such person, firm, company, corporation, or entity without the prior approval of Congress of the Philippines.
Mr. President, if I may clarify the answer earlier, those companies who are applying for legislative franchises usually are applying for nationwide satellite coverage, in which case you do need a legislative franchise, whereas those cable companies who have applied for authority with the NTC are usually just applying for local areas.
Eh bakit yung Sky? Sky Cable is nationwide.
Sky has a franchise according to them.
Legislative franchise.
Yes, sir, yung pong central.
Yes, it's the central.
Sky po kasi is brand.
Yeah. Sky is a brand name, whereas Central is the legal name.
Yung Central Cat TV.
Opo,
Yun yun. Yun yung 1995.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
That is
So,
expiring in
okay.
2020.
Well, anyway, Mr. President, I see that nothing prevents Congress from invoking this particular provision in the respective franchises granted to these companies. However, I would prefer that NTC, with its technical knowledge and expertise, act on these matters swiftly. I will be interested in the result of the Commission's review of this consolidation agreement, which I mentioned earlier, and we would like to request that you keep the Senate updated, and the Committee on Public Services updated likewise, so that we may review it. Thank you very much. We thank the distinguished sponsor and the officials of the DICT. I am through with my interpellation, Mr. President.
Is there any other member of the chamber who has reserved
Yes, Senator De Lima, Senator Recto, and Senator Gordon, Mr. President. I'll
think,
ask if they will continue, but
Senator-
Senator De Lima, please.
I
Senator
thank
De Lima
the
is recognized.
distinguished majority leader for his questions, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning to the distinguished sponsor. Good morning to
Good morning, ma'am.
Secretary
Distinguished
Salema
lady from Camarines Sur.
and the DICT family. Good morning to you all. Will the distinguished gentleman from Aurora yield to a few questions?
Certainly to the former Secretary of Justice and now our colleague here, the distinguished lady from Camarines Sur.
About the free Wi-Fi project of the department and the government, I'm just wondering whether the 1.7 billion of the 2.2 billion under the locally funded projects would be sufficient.
Sufficient to
complete-
cover the whole country, Mr. President? It's not sufficient, Mr. President, and they will welcome any...
So DICT would be quite minded to propose an increase. May we know what would be an appropriate amount? Because if this is not sufficient, then we oath to address that. We don't have to overemphasize the need for full and complete implementation of this very laudable project, which is on its third year of implementation, I understand.
That's right, distinguished colleague. Mr. President, they have handed me some figures and they would welcome any effort to speed up. But just to place on record...
Any proposed figures, please, for increase so that we know exactly?
Yes.
Because I'm serious
Well,
about that. I can ask for
the
appropriate
target for
amendments.
2017-2018 to reach 23,000 sites is 7.2 billion. So if you subtract 1.7 billion from that, that would mean an addition of about 5.5 billion
That's
to
a
reach-
deficiency.
to reach that target.
Assuming that would not be possible, although we will definitely try to ask for that balance of, that's still about 5-something billion.
5-something billion.
What should be a reasonable and realistic amount to target for your own purposes, for the department's own purposes, based on its projects and plans this coming year?
Hindi.
Good for 1 year. Any projection? I certainly would want a concrete projection.
Malaki daw yung 5, not realistic. So what is a realistic situation? Hindi peso figure. Hindi ko narinig sa calculation.
Ito siguro, 2015, 1.4 billion, 2017, 1.7, 2018, 2 billion.
An amount of 2 billion would be most welcome, Madam colleague, Mr. President.
Thank you. We will certainly push for this. I think this is a
Yeah.
reasonable and achievable
Commission thanks you, the department thanks you
amount.
for that initiative, distinguished colleague.
Now, in increasing this budget, would this mean faster connection? Or is just really,
It will help, distinguished colleague.
and what are the specific plans and programs of the department in terms of achieving faster internet connection?
They have made a proposal to the president, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. President, regarding a national broadband plan, the details of which have to be given the go signal by the president, because there are different types of or models of a broadband, national broadband. One, the most basic or most rudimentary would be the government would pay for the infrastructure, which would cost around 25 to 30 billion, and then ask the telcos, existing players, to connect especially to the rural areas. The second type of broadband would cost over 100 billion, between 100 and 200 billion, and this would just be the government, in fact, kind of, in a way, competing with the telcos.
It's a government broadband network primarily for government,
It would be to have the government broadband primarily for government, but nationwide,
including unserved areas.
including while the unserved areas, unserved meaning unserved by the telcos, would ride on that proposed broadband. So it's a wider conceptualization of broadband.
Are those costs for those projects been factored in already for next year's
No,
budget?
no, Mr. President.
Why not? Not yet
Because,
expected
well,
to be implemented this coming year.
when they gave their budget plan during the budget call, they had not yet done consultations, and they're still working on the budget. In fact, the budget proposal submitted by the former ICTO, which was under the DOST, Mr.
So not
President.
feasible for next year's implementation,
Not yet, because it awaits also the policy decision as to what shape and form
even if, assuming there would be a prompt action from the Office of the President on your proposal.
it's still being framed, distinguished colleague, Mr. President.
Thank you. Now, what about cyber attacks? May I know what are the steps being taken by the department to address and curb and avoid future cyber attacks?
Well, we have
Hackers.
the Commission against to deal with cybercrime. And regarding cybersecurity of government data, I've been informed, Your Honor, that the DICT has already conducted consultations on the National Cybersecurity Plan 2022 that aims to make our cyberspace resilient. And this has 4 key strategic imperatives. First is the protection of critical infrastructure. Second is the protection of government networks through the establishment of the National Computer Emergency Response Team, or NCERT. And third is the protection of supply chains and the Internet of Things. And fourth is the protection of individuals. The plan will be launched on December 8th of this year, Your Honor.
And there are corresponding budgetary supports or support for next year in respect of these department programs to address cyber attacks, because we all know how serious the problem is. Cyber attacks, hackers defacing government websites and stealing information online.
Mr. President, may I request a 1-minute suspension?
Suspended for 1 minute.
pursue this for now. Coco. Recipe Coco. Cybercrime.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, we just asked for a suspension so we could confer and allay the concerns of the lady from, distinguished lady senator from Camarines Sur, and I hope she's satisfied with some of the answers given to her, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President, I appreciate the enlightenment coming from the department and the good sponsor. And I do understand that this has some national security dimension, and this is a sensitive matter, and it would not be wise to tackle it publicly.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. President.
So I go to
Madam.
the next point about cyber crimes. The Cybercrime Investigation and Coordination Center, I know it's a new office, and may we know whether this has been duly constituted, and have they met? And has there been assignments already? Has there been investigations already being conducted pursuant to its mandate?
Have you, well, first is have you been organized? That's the first question.
This actually created by.
Yeah, I know, that's the law. Have you been? It's not yet been organized, Mr. President.
Is there an IRR already in place?
IRR? Do you have
And
an
may we
IRR?
know the reason for the delay in the constitution and in the operations of this important office?
There is an IRR for the cybercrime law, Your Honor, and there is a proposed organizational structure, and they hope that this will be created for the year. It would comprise, what we have right now is the executive director. We have a deputy.
Because the CICC is headed by the secretary himself, and then the vice
He's the chairman.
is the vice chair is the NBI director.
That's correct.
PNP is part of it, and then there are also representatives from certain sectors, like the academe, the NGOs. I think there are 3 non-government representatives in that body, and I'm a bit surprised that that office has not been constituted or officially constituted yet.
This has not been officially constituted yet. They're going to harmonize it with the DICT, which amended Republic Act 10175, the cybercrime law.
And there is a misly budget allotted to it for next year, 2.481 million, and this is just MOOE, to be used in the formulation, coordination, and monitoring of cybersecurity plans and policies. May we know exactly?
The total budget for next year for the cybercrime investigation under the NEP was 6 million, and under the Senate committee report, we doubled it, distinguished sponsor. But of course, the CICC, I'm sure, would welcome any additions that may be proposed in the plenary.
But I would want to be enlightened also with respect to its concrete plans. I definitely recognize the importance of this office, Cybercrime Investigation and Coordination Center, particularly as to its investigative mandate. And that is why NBI is a co-chair of this center. And with the proliferation of cyber crimes, that office ought to be operational already. Hacking, copyright infringement, intrusion into privacy of others, and let's not forget the online sexual exploitation of children.
Yes, I do agree, because the cybercrime office was already operational when it was still under the Department of Justice under your tenure. I in fact knew that it was under ASEC, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, the DOJ and even the NBI has its own offices of the cybercrime, but this new law precisely opted to create a bigger interagency body because of the hugeness of the problem of cybercrimes. And I'm very much concerned about the abuse and exploitation against children being undertaken through internet or online transactions, child pornography. There has really been a proliferation of that. NBI has investigated numerous cases already about child pornography, sexual exploitation of children through internet. And my next question to that is, how cooperative are the telcos in the investigation of this online sexual exploitation against children? Is the department looking into that?
How authoritative are the telcos?
How cooperative?
Oh, how cooperative, I'm sorry. Madam.
When the PNP or the NBI gives us the sites, they give us the sites, they block, the telcos, they block right now.
We've been informed that the telcos have been quite cooperative, Your Honor. And when they're given sites referring to pornography or being used for possible human trafficking, they block these sites.
So it's an automatic blocking. It's an automatic takedown,
It is upon instruction from PNP and NBI, Your Honor.
and that is being done promptly, because we used to encounter problems with respect to that. Delayed action from telcos.
No problems according to them.
So that is no longer a problem. Now, has DICT done mapping of crimes committed through social media platform widely used by public? Is there an existing database which constitutes the greatest percentage of this cyber crimes, etc.? I suppose that would be part of the planning in the specific programs, plans, and activities of this center to know first the lay of the land about these cyber crimes.
Done through social media platforms. The National Privacy Commission says they will eventually do it, but at the moment they're not doing it, Mr.
So
President.
is the National Privacy Commission? I'm talking about cybercrimes in general. Shouldn't it also be the CICT?
It should be the CICC according to them, but they're still in the process of being organized, Mr. President.
How
and
soon will it be organized?
Meron pa rin silang budget sa cybercrime. Well, there seems to be a tug of war in the government right now, Mr. President,
What
with the
kind
DOJ.
of tug of war? What kind of tug
There's a
of war?
jurisdictional tug of war Your Honor.
Is it the NBI or is it the PNP not cooperating?
It's the DOJ, the institution you used to head, Mr. President, because according to the Secretary of the DICT, the DOJ continues to exert or insist on jurisdiction with
Well, I
respect
know there's an
to-
Office of the Cybercrime, and the Office of the Cybercrime of DOJ is really kind of proactive.
Yes.
At least as far as that's what I know when I was there. Maybe it's still proactive, and that's part of the reason why they're getting to be
I think they're still in the
Jealous
process, Your Honor, of sorting out
about the turf.
precisely the limitations of their various jurisdictions.
To be honest about it, when the Cybercrime Prevention Act was being considered, DOJ was really asserting and insisting that the Office of the Cybercrime be retained and that it be recognized as as the premier investigative and prosecutorial unit of government in running after cybercrime offenders. But Congress decided otherwise and precisely put up the Cybercrime Investigation and Coordination Center in due recognition, as I said, of the hugeness of the problem, that maybe it would help or it would be better to have a bigger unit and just make DOJ through the NBI be part of it. And now you're telling us that part of the reason why the CICC has not yet been officially constituted is because of the lack of cooperation from the DOJ. In other words, it's still insisting on its turf. But it cannot do otherwise because the law mandates it to be part of the Cybercrime Investigation and Coordination Center. In fact, I'm really surprised that CICC has not been officially constituted and therefore has not been operational, notwithstanding the extreme importance of its mandate. And I'm not blaming Secretary Salalima, for the record.
As I said earlier, the Secretary says he agrees with your position regarding the history of the law and what it should be. But he said the DOJ is still insisting that cybercrimes belong under its jurisdiction and issues of cybersecurity pertain to the CICC and the DICT. So there is still that ongoing debate, Your Honor.
Actually, the Office of the Cybercrime has not been, the Office of the Cybercrime of the DOJ and even of the NBI have not been, abolished under the law. It's just that the mandate has been considerably changed. It is now supposed to be just the, insofar as prosecutorial, of course, because it's the DOJ, and also in terms of international cooperation, correct? So, as I said, DOJ has no choice but to cooperate and respect the law and respect the mandate and the jurisdiction of the CICC. Anyway, I would not belabor the point at this point, so last point would be on the National Privacy Commission. I wonder whether there's enough awareness-raising programs and activities relating to this relatively new office, National Privacy Commission, because part of its mandate, a very important one again, is to receive complaints, institute investigations on matters affecting any personal information, etc., etc. So does the general public know exactly what National Privacy Commission stands for?
Well, again, they have just been, thank you for the question, Your Honor. The National Privacy Commission was organized this year, and they are taking initial steps to make the public aware of the law and the Commission's role. And part of these first steps is to initiate talks with social media giant Facebook on the matter of privacy issues, because there are 55 million Filipinos on Facebook.
May
In
I
a-
know whether there are complaints filed already? With
Yes, Your Honor. There have been
how
complaints
many?
filed. How many? How many? 23 complaints as of the moment, Your Honor.
And may we know the causes of action? Just a general description, not necessarily the specific cases, general description of exactly what kind of complaints are being lodged with the National Privacy Commission. And how do we encourage victims of violation of privacy to invoke the assistance and the jurisdiction of that body?
When you say social media, Leon? One-third are social media complaints, such as bullying, for instance, Mr. President. Another one-third comprise of spam-like marketing efforts. And another third consists of complaints from individuals against companies regarding processing of data within their companies. So that's roughly the delineation of the various complaints.
Are the proceedings before the National Privacy Commission deemed to be confidential in nature, or are meant to be confidential, or is that actually open to the public while the complaint is being tackled?
They are mandated, the Commission is mandated to protect the privacy of the complainants, Your Honor, Mr. President. But sir, sometimes there are public interest cases.
Which we are open to, for example,
So it's on a case-to-case basis? It depends on the very nature of the complaint, whether or
Yes,
not
it would
be
depend
deemed-
whether my understanding is whether the case would involve public interest, Your Honor.
I suppose the commission has its own rules and regulations, and if not yet done, it would help.
They
if
were
it would-
promulgated, the IRR was promulgated on September 7 of this year,
Is that
Your Honor.
particular matter incorporated already in those rules and regulations about how to treat the proceedings before this commission, whether privileged or not?
Is it covered or not? No, in your IRR of September. What is the rule? Can you show me? Show me. According to the chairperson of the NPC, or the National Privacy Commission, it is there, and I asked him to show me the rule which would. No, no. 1 minute suspension, Mr. President.
Suspended for 1 minute.
Covered by rules. So it's a yes or no question. You told me yes. So now you're telling me your issue.
sagot, sabihin lang natin, walang sagot.
What's the question? Di ba about the stipulations under the rules
Can I approach you?
of the complaint? But if not, please, in any cases, they safeguard the privacy of Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, in response to the concern raised by the distinguished lady senator from Camarines Sur, the NPC takes note of her concern regarding protecting the privacy of the complainants given the role of the commission and the purpose of the law, Mr. President. Yeah.
Thank you. And I would really love for the commission to consider revising its rules and regulations to incorporate that matter. And just one last point, one last question. I see that there is an allocated MOOE budget under the National Privacy Commission for activities in relation to regulation and enforcement of privacy and data security in information and communications technology. Can you please translate this
What is that 150 million for?
into concrete plans and programs? 20.2 million MOOE. And I would love
I
to
can't
to
memorize it. Can you
hear
give me a paper that says that?
awareness raising activities for the National Privacy Commission. Continuous education for the public, exactly what National Privacy Commission is, what does it stand for, what is its functions, and what kind of complaints can be lodged before it, and the safeguards that it may provide, especially for
Breakdown.
complainants. 20.2 million.
But there's no amounts. There's no amounts. General lang eh. There's no breakdown of the... She's asking for a breakdown of the 150 million.
Regulatory and enforcement services, regulation and enforcement of privacy and data security in information and communication systems.
Okay. Where? Here, I've received the breakdown of the MOE budget of the 150 million, 99% goes, 99 million 293,000 goes to MOE. And of that 99 million, Mr. President, Your Honor, 79 million will be used for administrative expenses, while 20 $1,266,000 will fund its main function of regulating and enforcing privacy and data security in information and communication systems. The big ticket items here, Mr. President, would include 24.2 million for repairs and maintenance, 23.1 million for rent and lease expenses, and 17.505 million for professional services. Out of the capital outlay budget of 51,446,000, they will use this to purchase the following: machinery and equipment outlay, or ICT equipment, representing 27,780,000; transportation equipment outlay, or motor vehicles, worth 12 million; furniture, fixtures, and books outlay, representing 10 million; as well as computer software or intangible assets outlay of 1,666,000, Your Honor.
Thank you. I just need the breakdown of the activities, but it may be done after the session now. On the formulation, I'm sorry, on the regulation and enforcement of privacy and data security in information and communication systems, allotted with MOOE of 20.2 million. That's all I was asking for, and not the other items. But it need not be given to me now, and that is actually my last question.
It's for a digital forensics laboratory, I'm informed, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Digital,
And they plan digital forensics laboratory, which is actually intended to be a shared resource of the Commission as well as the CICC.
oh, good to know that. Thank you very much.
Thank
That's
you.
all.
Thank you,
Thank you very much, Senator De
distinguished
Lima.
colleague from Camarines Sur. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Per the information of the Majority Leader, Senator Recto wishes to take the floor at this point. He is not yet in the hall, so we can ask for a 5-minute suspension, and the Secretariat is directed to inform Senator Recto that it is his turn to session suspended. No, huwag na tayong... Ralph. Session is resumed. Before we recognize Senator Recto, may the chair know from the majority leader if there are other senators who would wish to take the
Yes.
floor on this budget.
Yes, Mr. President, may we now recognize the minority leader for the last interpellator of the budget of the DICT.
Now, given the
Senator
time
Recto.
constraints that we have, we should consider working through lunch so that we can just try to finish as many as we can. The next, after the DICT, the Department of Transportation is next on the line.
We were thinking of calling on the SBMA before,
On the what? I'm sorry?
the SBMA.
SBMA,
Before the
okay.
DICT, before the Department of Transportation, because
Okay.
medyo may kahabaan yung DOTR.
Okay, so the suggestion of the chair is for the body to consider just having a sandwich and working through lunch in order that we do not interrupt. If that is acceptable. Otherwise,
We'll talk to the other members who
All right.
can be here
all right.
and who will interpolate, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you for the suggestion. May we now recognize Senator Ralph Recto.
Senator Recto, who authored and pushed for the passage of the law which created the DICT, is recognized and hope that the questions can be shortened.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the distinguished sponsor of the budget of the DICT yield to a few questions?
Certainly to the good father of the DICT.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, what is the average Mbps or internet speed in the Philippines?
It's different for fixed line. For fixed line, I think it's 3 to 4 Mbps.
Fixed line.
And for mobile, it's 8.5 Mbps, Mr.
So
President.
what would the average be?
That's based on Akamai. Well, if we, somewhere in the middle would be 5 to 6 Mbps, Mr. President.
Okay, and where would that place us in terms of international competitiveness?
Well, based on this index, the Akamai State of the Internet 2016 report, the Philippines is
Sa Asia Pacific po, we are
ranked 6th in terms of average connection speed for mobile internet in the Asia Pacific.
No, globally, pangilan tayo?
wala po kasing global sir, but ito pong sa fixed naman, we are 9.
For global, the measurement, the index is somewhat different, distinguished colleague, Mr. President. It is the ICT Development Index, where we are 98th as of 2015, Mr. President.
In terms of speed yan?
This is just in terms of general ICT
No,
development.
the question is in terms of speed.
There's no measurement.
What I have here is that
Walang
the average speed, second quarter of 2016, Akamai State of Internet Connectivity, were average of 6.1 Mbps. And we're about 100 ranking.
105 according to
Correct. And South Korea would be number 1 with 27. Is that correct?
South Korea, number 1. Can I see? South Korea and Singapore are top, Mr. President.
Correct, including Hong Kong, Japan, Taiwan.
Australia is fast as well, Mr.
Okay.
President. Yes.
So in ASEAN, pangilan naman tayo?
Sa Asia Pacific, boss, we're ranked 6.
ASEAN.
Hindi, Asia Pacific. Yun lang, sir, kasi ang meron nito. Akamay lang, Asia Pacific.
Are you sure?
Pang ilan tayo?
Saan yun?
Asia Pacific, yung 6.
What they have is the Asia Pacific region, Mr. President, where we are sixth. They don't seem to know the figure for just the ASEAN. But I would suspect we're somewhere in the middle, Mr. President, somewhere in between Singapore, Brunei, and Malaysia being the higher performers, whereas Laos and Myanmar would be the slower ones, and we'd be somewhere in the middle, along with Vietnam and Indonesia.
And who is ahead of us? Is Vietnam ahead of us already?
Ahead of us in terms of speed? In terms of fixed internet, yes, they are, Mr. President.
So nalampasan na tayo ng Vietnam. And that is precisely why we created this department, di ba?
That's right, Mr. President.
What is the mandate of the department? And I don't blame the new secretary. The secretary is from the industry, and bago pa lang naman ang department na to. There's an opportunity for the Duterte administration to improve our ICT ranking and quality and service over the next 6 years.
Yes, Mr. President. The DICT, created under the law, sponsored and authored by the distinguished minority leader, is mandated to be the government's primary policy, planning, coordinating, implementing, and administrative entity that will plan, develop, and promote the national ICT development agenda.
Yes, Mr. President. And Mr. President, a 10% increase in penetration rate should translate to a 1.5% increase in GDP.
That's right.
Okay? So how much will it cost to improve the penetration rate, if I may jump to that issue first?
How much would it cost? Approximate lang. It's a rough
What is the cost of improving
10% sinasabi.
a 10% increase in penetration rate?
Your broadband penetration. Kasi ang point mo, 10% broadband penetration equals 1.5% of your GDP increase.
On the option 2, yun po yung nasabi na namin na option 2 is to create a broadband network primarily for government.
Hindi, pero he's asking nga, yung how much will it cost? 10%. He's very, I told you, he's very precise with the figure. 10% broadband.
Because we're now at 47%.
Over 5B?
No. So this is 77 over 5.
77.
That's the estimate. 77 billion. That is the estimate. 25 billion. So over 5.
1.5.
Because we need to
Around 25%.
more.
I mean, what is the cost of
15 billion.
15 billion.
77 billion.
Because we're at 47% penetration of the contract. So, 50% more. So that can be addressed by providing
Which cost
broadband
77?
network. 77 more.
So divide by 5 to get the 10. 77 divided by 5, what is that?
15.
Approximately 15 billion.
Mr. President, the approximate, very rough estimate is about 15 billion, Mr. President. Yeah.
15 billion.
Yes, to achieve the 10%.
If you were to
additional
invest
penetration.
15 billion, that would increase the penetration rate by 10%. And the yield to the economy is 1.5% of GDP, which is equivalent to 225 billion. Okay? So a 15 billion investment should yield 225 billion.
It sounds like a good investment to me,
Precisely
Mr.
the point,
President.
Mr. President. Huh? So bakit lumiliit yung budget naman ng DICT? Bakit binawasan? But
There
you can
was
answer that
a-
later on, ah. Parang hindi binigyan ng importansya. 3 billion lang eh.
I think it
So,
was
an investment of 3 billion, magkano ang yield?
around 70 billion by using the rough calculations done earlier.
So the more we invest in ICT, the more benefits our people will get.
It would seem so, and that's probably the reason why the more advanced economies are pouring in money in
That's right.
ICT
In fact,
sector.
how much are we making today from ICT? The BPO industry alone is about $25 billion.
It's about $22 billion. That's the size
Growing.
of the IT BPO
Growing.
industry.
Correct. Now, so we have established that one, isa tayo sa pinakamabagal sa buong mundo. Okay? What about the cost? How much does it cost per Mbps in the Philippines?
What we have is a GBPS, sir. GBPS. Ito po, it's not NBPS, that's what's available in the world.
What is available, Your Honor, Mr. President, is the price per GBPS. And on this ranking,
Mbps yan?
GBPS,
What is the difference of the GPBS and the Mbps?
It's 1,000 times.
it's 1,000 times Mbps.
Okay, correct. Yeah, but to the ordinary consumer, ano bang ginagamit niya? Mbps. Yun ang
Mbps.
pag-usapan natin.
Yes. This is the study available according to the NTC. The Philippines, again, is...
Mobile fixed. Dollars po yan.
Pangilan, what's the rank?
Sunod-sunod po yan, sir. We are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th in Asia.
We are fifth, so somewhere in the middle in ASEAN, Mr. President, with Singapore being the top at $7.11 per 1 GBPS. Brunei is second, Malaysia is third. Surprisingly, Laos is fourth
Dinampasan na tayo ng Laos dyan.
in mobile broadband, Mr. President.
Okay.
So, according to the Laos na ho tayo
Laos sa Pilipinas. So.
Ito naman po sa fixed line.
For fixed broadband, Mr. President, we are second highest in terms of the price per 10 Gbps.
In the region. What about sa buong mundo? Pangilan tayo?
Ito lang po kasi, sir, available na.
They don't have the data. Perhaps they can look for it, Mr. President.
But, sir, just to let you
It's impossible that they don't have the data. Who will have the data? The NTC?
Perhaps the data is very unflattering, Mr. President. So
Oo. Magkano ang Mbps? What I have here. How can they not have the data when I have the data?
yeah, I'm quite surprised that that's the answer.
The
being given,
Philippines
Mr. President.
is roughly $20 per Mbps. How much is Vietnam?
may NBPS per monthly, it's 1,000.
The cost per Mbps monthly is on the average 1,155 pesos, Mr. President. So it's the third highest in Asia.
Okay.
So with the highest being Myanmar, second being Laos, and third is the Philippines.
Okay.
So that should disturb us, Mr. President, because
Okay.
there tends to be a correlation of these indices with
Correct,
economic development.
Precisely the point. And that's what we're driving at. And then there are many other indicators on ICT competitiveness, technological readiness. The Philippines is ranked 83 out of 138 countries. Internet users, 92. Fixed broadband internet, 92. Again, out of 138 countries. The latest ranking. Bandwidth, internet bandwidth, number 72. Mobile broadband subscription, number 80. in terms of penetration rate, we're about 47%. That means kung maging plus 10% to 52, thereabouts, the payback is tremendous, di ba?
I think
Okay.
the minority leader is right,
With the
Mr.
3
President.
billion investment next year, tataas ba yung penetration rate?
Will the penetration rate go up with your 3 billion budget?
It will not,
Not significantly, Mr. President.
not significantly. So the 3 billion that we will be investing, what will the payback be?
The payback is in improving the overall ICT
No,
infrastructure.
in terms of value. Wala eh.
In terms of quantification of
Oo.
the...
Which we did a few computations earlier, di ba? Okay, now, sige, let's move on. Ha? So bakit, what is the reason for the reduction in the budget in 2017?
Mr. President, there was a non-recurring item in the 2016 budget, 600 million representing,
One locally funded project,
what's called?
Philippine Government Interoperability Exchange.
It's a 600 million project in the previous year's budget called the Philippine Interoperability Exchange.
And what does that do?
It's for e-government systems for the different agencies and government.
It's an e-government system which is aligned with the e-government plans of the government to align the various IT systems of the different agencies, Mr. President.
Okay, so that's already an investment done. It's a sunk-in cost na.
That's right, Mr. President.
So it's operating already. And there's no need to invest more next year on that project.
Some agencies are already on board. We're continuing to onboard.
It is continually operating. Some agencies are already on board, such as the
Philippine Bureau of Internal Revenue.
BIR, but they're still talking to other agencies to come on board.
Okay, let's discuss that later on. Let me continue with where we started. No? What will the game plan be by 2022? For example, etong cost ba?
Mr. President, I think they're still in the process of coming up with a national digital strategy. There was one for 2011 to 2016, but this new team will conduct consultations, and I think the target for that, it would be the equivalent of a medium-term plan for the industry by, when is the target for?
I would assume they've submitted their plans already to the NEDA, because the NEDA should be coming out with the PDP by January next year.
You submitted all your plans to NEDA.
We have inputted to the Philippine Development Plan.
I think the question really is, where do we see the government's role in ICT to be? Will the new administration want to invest public money not only in free Wi-Fi, but also to compete?
So where are we?
Halimbawa, is that part of their thinking with the private sector as far as delivering ICT services are concerned?
Well, some of the goals would include addressing the ICT infrastructure gaps, and I think partially, at least in part, the 2017 budget would start that process, Mr. President. Secondly is to ensure fair market competition in the industry. Third would be to have a proactive role in the implementation of policies and strict enforcement of regulations. Fourth goal is to improve the human capital development through ICT. Fifth is to ensure cybersecurity. Sixth is to utilize ICT for good governance. 7 is to formulate, modernize, and implement ICT policy and regulatory frameworks.
Yeah, those are all motherhood statements, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr.
What I'm
President.
saying is that specifically, what are the plans to improve the penetration rate? What are the specific plans to reduce the cost
Policy and regulatory review.
of internet in the Philippines and make it more accessible and available to the general public?
Yeah. So you're asking specifics in terms of budget deliverables, Mr. President?
Budget deliverables, or for example, in their case, what are they planning? They've submitted already, I suppose, a PDP plan to NEDA. Diba?
Well, they have a...
Will they be investing, halimbawa, will they be investing on broadband?
well,
Will they
earlier
be
I
investing
was...
on an international gateway in the future? Are they looking at these things? Will
I-
they be investing in the last mile?
There is a proposal on the desk of the President for broadband, Mr. President. And the decision lies with the President as to how extensive a broadband network it would be. But they've suggested three options. The first is the very basic infrastructure to be answered by the government and asking the telcos to hook up to that option. That's around 25 to 30 billion. The second is to create a national broadband network covering the whole country, and it would include the underserved areas. This would cost
77 to 200 billion. That's just if it's
77 to over 100 billion pesos, Mr. President. And the third option is to have the government operate as a third telco, but I think there are very few advocates of that third option, Mr. President.
What about in the region, South Korea? Does the government operate a telco? Does the government provide internet services?
yeah, they provided
Or is it purely private?
to incentivize rollout of fiber by their private.
What are the models in the region, Mr. President?
South Korea, I was told, Mr. President, provided seed money to some of the private investors to lay down the infrastructure, including the fiber optic cables. They invested, in fact, $24 billion for a public internet backbone.
So it's owned by, the backbone is owned by government.
They believe so, and it is leased to the private sector, Mr. President.
And in Singapore, it's owned by the state.
They've invested on a national broadband network.
It's a similar setup in Singapore, I'm told, Mr. President.
And in Japan,
It's private in Japan, but the difference with Japan is in Tokyo alone, I think they have 16,000 cell phone towers, whereas
We have 22,000.
we have 22,000 just for the whole country, and that's 16,000 for Tokyo alone, the greater Tokyo area alone.
how big is the industry right now? Magkano ba ang gross revenue ng Globe at ng Smart? Or PLDT?
About 400 billion is the figure.
Gross revenue.
Yes.
And how much has government purchased from them? Would we have that data? So national government and the local government units, for example, and GOCCs.
They're retrieving the data, Mr. President.
Budget.
It's a rough figure.
This is low. This is, I think, very low.
NGA.
Anong source?
Sa NGA lang to. NGA lang to. According to the NEP, the total for items tagged under the MITHI, or the IT program of the government, is around 250 million pesos, Mr. President. This is exclusive of communications expenses under gas.
No, you know, the question is, how much do we purchase from Globe and Smart,
Just give me a figure. What's the figure?
or Globe and PLDT?
Just
What is the government bill? What is our contribution to their 400 billion in sales?
Hindi, ang tanong niya, his take-off point is the 400 billion. How much of that is procured by the government or paid for by the government? Should, Mr. President. In an ideal world, yes.
Okay, we should
Where,
have leverage from them, right?
Where,
Dapat may discount kung volume sales, may discount dapat ang gobyerno. That's one, or we tell them, And then we regulate them to begin with, right?
Yes, and it's also part of their legislative franchise, Mr.
Correct.
President. So.
Okay, so are there concrete plans? Like, for example, next year, tataas yung penetration rate by 2022. What would it look like? And then the cost of internet services to Juan de la Cruz, what it will look like 2 years from now, 4 years from now, 6 years from now. Meron bang planong ganon?
From the consumer point of view, Mr. President.
Yes, sa DICT.
He's asking for a vision to improve.
If you want to grow at a faster rate, the economy, and create more jobs in the process,
projected cost with all the reforms? Yeah.
we need to make more investments in the ICT infrastructure. di
Yes,
ba?
I am total agreement with the distinguished minority leader on that, Mr. President.
Okay.
Mr. President, in the meantime, while they are retrieving the data, if I may share a piece of information I've been given regarding the number of cell sites in the Philippines. We have 15,000 cell sites. Vietnam has 55,000. Indonesia has 76,000. Thailand has 52,000. Bangladesh has 27,000. So this is one of the reasons why our internet is very slow in the country. Just to put it on record, Mr. President.
Can the sponsor repeat that? We didn't catch it.
Number of cell sites, Philippines 15,000, Vietnam 55,000, Indonesia 76,000, Thailand 52,000, Bangladesh 27,000.
That's for Wi-Fi, no? Mobile.
Who gave it?
Cell sites, eh?
It's for handphones, yes, for mobile phones.
Okay. Now, the government has many other assets, di ba? Yung, halimbawa, have we thought about utilizing for the last mile, halimbawa, yung mga electric cooperatives that you can utilize?
There is an agreement between the DICT and the DPWH, Mr. President, where when there is a new highway being built, it will also include provision for the cables.
Broadband?
Yes.
Cable. What about the electric cooperatives to deliver to households?
They agree with you that they can be tapped, Mr. President.
Is it part of your plans already?
We've started the discussion with the National Electrification Administration.
No concrete plans as of the moment, but they have initiated discussions with the NEA, Mr. President.
Okay.
Perhaps we can ask them to fast track or advance these discussions.
Okay. What about yung those cables under the sea going to the Philippines? Meron ba tayong, are we planning to make investments there?
Submarine cable.
Submarine cables, yung international gateway. How many do we have right now ba?
7. We have 7, Mr. President.
And all of them are owned by whom?
Who owns? Globe and PLDT, Mr.
All the
President.
7.
People understand.
There is another private one in Mindanao, owned by... Who owns it? Who owns it? Yeah. Yeah, that's an aggregation. That's not a private entity. It's owned by a consortium. There's one more in Mindanao. So, but 7,
Okay.
it's still, the answer still stands, Mr.
Okay.
President.
In what you submitted to the Office of the President, your recommendations, are you also recommending that that the national government have their own international gateway facility?
Kasama ba yung international gateway for us to have our own as part of the recommendation, Mr. President? It's not part of the plan.
It's not
submitted
part
to
of the
President.
plan. Okay. Okay, so what about the NGCP? Is that a resource or an asset that we can utilize to deliver also broadband connectivity?
Yes, certainly, Mr. President, because the NGCP or the National Grid Corporation has up to 10,000 kilometers of fiber optics strung across its towers, covering the north to south of the Philippines.
Sino may-ari niyan? Gobyerno ba?
It's owned by Bisa.
Yung right of way, gobyerno.
It's government owned, but the right to use has already been assigned to the NGCP, to the NGCP.
To operate.
There's a management agreement
Yes,
for them to
management
use
lang.
it.
To operate. But the asset is still owned by government.
Yes, Mr. President.
So all of that can be utilized by the government.
Yes,
by the
Mr. President.
DICT
Yes, Mr.
department
President.
also in delivering these connections to the countryside, so on and so forth, right?
Yes, there are talks ongoing, Mr. President.
Okay. So why not have your own international gateway na rin? Meron na kayong NGCP, may electric cooperatives na pwedeng gamitin. Why not have your own gateway na rin?
May I ask for a 1-minute suspension, Mr. President?
Suspended for 1 minute.
Mr. President, we're ready to resume.
Session is resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we move on to another issue. We had a short break, and they explained to me what their recommendations are insofar as improving our penetration rate, reducing the cost of internet, and improving its speed as well, no? And the role of that government will play in the process.
May the chair suggest that the responses to the Central Recto be made of record? Because this is not of record, and maybe by next year, 1 year from now, we will check whether these promises have been fulfilled.
Mr.
Just a
President,
summary.
plano
Just a summary.
plano pa lang lahat, ho.
Kaya nga po eh.
Kaya they need to get the President's approval yet for this plan.
I'm sorry?
They need to get the President's approval yet for the plans.
They need the President's approval for the plan.
Yes, sir.
Is that done by every cabinet secretary? Or it doesn't?
I think, if I may, Mr. President, distinguished minority leader, I think the investments are quite large that the distinguished minority leader was inquiring about, such as the possibility of the government laying down its own submarine cable. I think these are probably beyond it has to be cleared with the cabinet and the president because of the size of the investment, Mr.
Well,
President.
at least these are plans, and if indeed it is not carried out, there can be an explanation, as in there are no funds. But
The funds will always be available, Mr. President, because as I mentioned, it's really a matter of prioritization, and NEDA, I suppose, will have to go through the NEDA board. But
that is why the chair is interested in putting in the record what those plans are.
they mentioned that they've submitted to the President a 30 billion plan, a 70 billion plan, so on and so forth. Now, just to inform the members of the DICT family that, as I mentioned last Tuesday in the general principles, no, the Duterte administration will have 26 trillion pesos in the next 6 years. They could invest in capital outlay about 8 trillion a year, more or less 8 trillion in the next 6 years. So a 70 billion investment is really very small. in the scheme of
Are
things.
you referring to the 2017 budget, Mr. President?
No, I'm referring to the 6-year budget of the President.
Yes. But you mentioned the second figure, Mr. President. What was that second figure?
In the scheme of things, 26 trillion pesos.
Yes, this is a total
Next
budget.
year's budget is 3.4, is the first down payment
Yes.
of that 26 trillion.
That's right, Mr. President. And,
In the next 6
I get
years.
the point of the minority leader. It's a very small investment.
Yeah, and then 8 trillion pesos for capital outlay in the next 6 years. So the first down payment is next year, it's about 800 billion, right? And here we're talking about, for 2017, 3 billion lang binawasan pa for such a very important industry. Okay?
I
Now,
agree with the
there are plans being that have been submitted to the Office of the President for 30 billion and 70 billion. So napakaliit. And that's why I keep on reiterating that in the scheme of things, you're talking about 26 trillion in the next 6 years. The down payment is 3.4 trillion next year. I also mentioned that 1 trillion will not be spent in 2016. So carry over yan next year, yung 3.4 that we're talking about today, will actually be 4.4 trillion next year, continuing appropriation. Katulad ng DICT. Mababa, maliit na yung budget ninyo, mababa pa yung utilization rate. In 2015, wala pa yung DICT, you had the ICTO under DOST. And the budget then was in 2016, 3.7 billion. But you did not spend 2.3 billion in 2015. And therefore, the adjusted appropriation this year is actually 6 billion. Okay? Now, 6 billion is actually available this year. How much have you obligated of the 6?
It only obligated 700 million? They've only obligated 714 million, Mr. President.
714 million. Are you sure you'll not obligate? Should be more than that.
Hindi, sinatanong niya is of the 6. So, it should be, it should be these. It should be these added. Then 1.45 billion. Kasi ang tinatanong niya the 6 billion carried over. Your utilization must also be carried over. It's almost 2 billion. Mr. President, the figure cited was only for 2016, and you're correct that the total utilization should be around 2 billion, approximately.
2 billion.
Yes.
Okay. So do we expect to obligate more between now until the end of the year?
How much? How much? Figure lang, figure lang. Before the end of the year. Before the end of the year. They hope to obligate approximately 1.9 billion before the end of the year, Mr.
Before the
President.
end of the year.
Yes.
So how much would they obligate of the 6 before the end of the year?
Well, roughly 4 billion, maybe a little less. Yeah.
4 billion at most.
At most 4 billion.
So may 2 billion, and I suppose you're obligating 2015, right?
Yes,
Yeah, you
yes,
want to
Mr. President.
finish 2015.
Yes, so it does not
Because
lapse.
whatever you do not obligate of 2016 is carried over
Yes, Mr. President.
to 2017. So how much do you expect to carry over in 2017?
Well, roughly 2 billion,
2 billion.
Mr. President.
So the budget of DICT next year is not only 3 billion.
It would include the carryover.
With the
Mr. President.
carryover, magiging 5 billion. Right?
Yes, Mr. President.
Okay, so what can you accomplish with 5 billion? Most of that money will be spent for what? Free Wi-Fi.
Yung free Wi-Fi is about 1.7 billion.
The
Mr.
1.7
President,
refers only to the 2017 portion. It does not refer to the continuing, is that correct?
Yeah, 2015 and 2016 combined appropriations would for free Wi-Fi would be 3 billion, and I know the distinguished minority leader had a hand in coming
Correct.
up with those funds. Yeah.
Correct. And that was not in the NEP in 2015.
That's right. That's
That
right.
found its way only in the Senate.
It was realigned from other budgets
Correct.
precisely for this purpose and to
Correct.
the ends sought by
Correct.
the
Okay.
distinguished minority leader, Mr. President.
Now, in the past, it was told to us that we would be able to hit 1,500 municipalities. We've been doing this for almost 2 years now. Where are we today? How many municipalities have we connected?
Hopefully, by the end of the year, we'll hit 400, Mr. President, and by the end of 2017, 1,634 municipalities and cities by the end of the year, end of next year, Mr. President.
Okay, so you're down to 400 right now.
Well, that's still by the end of the year. They're actually only at 40 right now, Mr. President.
You're only at, what happened? You were already connected to more than that.
But the implementation has been quite slow, Mr. President.
No, they were connected to more municipalities than 40 a few months back. Hininto ba ninyo?
Yung sites lang sa municipality.
The sites were increased, but not the number of municipalities, Mr. President.
Okay. No, but I understand that you were in more municipalities.
ICTO, the correct answer. What was it? Yeah. Well, that's the figure, Mr. President. It's they have 190 sites in 40 municipalities at the moment, but they want to go to 400 by the end of the year.
What was it in the first quarter of this year? Or in the second quarter? You were in more municipalities, if I recall.
The project rolled out in June this year, I'm told, Mr. President.
No, you rolled out in 2015.
That was the bidding, according to them, Mr. President.
What about January, first quarter of this year? How many municipalities were you in?
Ilan yan?
80, 70, sorry,
Ano yung presentation nila?
it's not municipalities.
Okay. Perhaps the distinguished minority leader was referring to the pilot testing in January of this year, which involved 43 sites, Mr. President.
September. Saan nakalagay?
43 sites, ilang municipalities?
Okay. So again, how many do you expect by the end of the year?
400, Mr. President.
400. They just made a presentation a few months ago in the Senate Committee on Science and Technology.
They were targeting 668 at the time, Mr. President, but the implementation has not proceeded according to their plans exactly.
So why should we believe them now na 1,600 next year, at the end of next year? Kung in a span of 1.5 months lang, from 668 to 400,
To instruct LGUs to streamline their permitting process.
Part of the slowdown is attributed to permitting from LGUs, Mr. President. So there's an executive order from the Palace.
when you say permitting of LGUs, hindi pinapayagan ng LGU na magtayo kayo ng free wifi doon?
Yes, sir, memorandum of agreement.
They usually sign memoranda, Mr. President, and sometimes it takes a long time, according to them.
So they're blaming other people except themselves. Baka mali ang project design. Kaya may failure of bidding.
Failure of bidding is now referring to failure of bidding.
I would doubt very much, Mr. President, that the LG will not accept a free Wi-Fi project in
I'm
their
sure.
plaza, in their schools,
I'm sure
in
none
their
of the
parks.
ones in Batangas or Aurora would reject that or take.
Yeah, I
proceed
don't
on
think
those
anyone in
projects.
the province of Batangas
That's right, Mr. President.
will object.
Sir, commonly, sir, yung mga provider natin, yung paglalagay nila ng mga networks nila, nahihirapan sila kung another one is the MOA. Kasi dumadaan sa isang lugar.
Well, they're citing a few other factors such as the need for the MOA to go through the sanggunians of the local governments.
No, that's if they're asking for money. Are you asking for money from the LGUs? Then there is nothing to go through the sanggunian. Oh.
Counterpart kasi po. So,
May counterpart sila. For what? For what?
the site,
Yeah, please, gentleman from Bukidnon, please go ahead.
Senator Subiri?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with the permission of the Minority Floor Leader, because we've had problems with cell sites, even in especially in Bukidnon, because it is a mountain area, upland, and you know, it has to be line of sight. So once a mountain covers it, wala na po dun sa likod ng bundok. So we had actively asked PLD, Smart and Globe to put more cell sites in the province. And their problem apparently, we had a meeting here in the back room, Mr. President. The problem was their frustrations were really with the LGUs because each LGU has a different fee or permitting request. requirement.
Can you gentlemen repeat that? We didn't
Yeah.
catch the reason.
Yeah, the reason is the LGUs, because different LGUs have different requirements and permittings and fees. It's not standard. That's number one. Number two,
Mr. President, if I just may react
yes.
to that. That has nothing to do with the Wi-Fi project that we're discussing. That's another issue altogether.
yes.
That is putting up cell sites.
Pero yung sa
Throughout the
Wi-Fi,
country.
Mr. President, with respect to the minority floor leader, it seems their complaint to us, basta Globe at Smart ang lumapit sa kanila, pera kagad iniisip. So even if it's free Wi-Fi, gusto nilang kwartahan yung, this is not particular in Bukidnon, but they were explaining the whole country whenever they try to provide free Wi-Fi areas, cell sites. Kasi cell sites is no cost to local government also. Free yan eh. Tatayo lang nila yan. So, dyan sila nahihirapan. They were asking me actually to sponsor a bill to fast track. If you want to fast track free Wi-Fi, you want to fast track better cell site service, if we can sponsor a bill, and I was telling them I'll discuss it with Senator Grace Po sa Public Services, on how we can, come up with fixed requirements for all LGUs to follow. Because that's the point of corruption, that's when it comes in. Pag madagdagan ng requirements,
No, I agree with you.
yan yung nangyayari dyan ng kaguluhan. I'm just adding some inputs. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes. No, I understand the point of the gentleman from Bukidnon, and I agree with him insofar as providing cell sites are concerned. But I'll give you an example. In Lipa, wala namang problema, or in the province of Batangas. You can go anywhere and you have a cell site. Okay? Now, they've not been able to roll out the free public Wi-Fi. That is the point that I'm trying to drive at here. It has nothing to do with the cell sites as far as that issue is concerned. Now, I understand for better connectivity nationwide, you need to have more of these cell sites. Okay? So, halimbawa, in the province of Batangas, dapat yan, 31 municipalities na eh. How many are you? How many municipalities are you in right now?
They're in two. They're in Lipa and Batangas City, Mr. President.
So only 2. Are you sure? You're probably in more.
But they pledged to be in many more by the end of 2017, Mr. President.
2017 is too late.
Well, we will
May
convince them.
problema ba sa
We
cell
will
site in
cajole them
Batangas?
to-
May problema ba sa cell site? That has nothing to do with this discussion eh. It's a different issue
Yes,
altogether.
I agree with the minority leader. It is a separate discussion. But there are some overlapping factors, Mr. President,
Yeah.
which is to put down the free Wi-Fi, they still need the service connector or provider to
Correct.
be
I agree.
there.
I agree with that, yeah.
So
Okay.
these are some of the factors, but they're not totally saying they are blameless,
Yeah.
Mr. President.
Yeah. No, what I'm saying is that maybe the project design is wrong. You've had already 2 years to do this, right? And
They
you
will
should
take
have
a look at
learned
the
from the
project design to
mistakes
see.
of the past. That's the point.
Yes, Mr. President. Yes.
Di ba? Okay. So you're saying that by next year, all cities and municipalities, you will be able to cover. Remember, your budget is 6 billion na. Or rather, 5 billion. 3 plus 2.
3 plus 2, carry over.
So hindi lang 3 billion yan.
Kayo, baka hindi nyo mamit at next year pag tinanong kayo. Ano, what is the realistic,
Well, they said it's already bid out, so they're expecting it to roll out. So they're sticking by their target, Mr. President.
Okay.
Distinguished
Okay.
minority leader. Yeah.
Okay, now, they still have excess funds, right? Yung unutilized for next year. For this year, carry over next year. What do they intend to do with that? Ibibid out yan for what? More sites?
They will review the project design for 2017 to ensure a faster rollout, Mr. President.
Okay. Sige, so they'll review it. Okay. Could they give us, so lahat na yan. There's no need for a list because you're saying everyone will be covered. Right? Maybe if at all you want to find out what part of the municipality will be covered?
Yes, yes. I think Minority Leader makes a point there. Just to be clear, it's kind of like the electrification. NEA, or the National Electrification Administration, is
Or LUA?
or
water
LUA, yes.
connection?
When they say it will be covered, does that mean the whole or the entirety of the municipality is covered, but certain portion of the municipality? Just to put that on record, Mr. President.
Correct. So maybe they can provide a list to us. Sino yung mga makakabitan and what areas?
What area,
diba?
yes.
Okay.
With the
What about-
specifics, Mr. President,
yeah.
yes.
What about universities? Pwede.
Kailangan nyo ng data? Is this all for 2017?
In terms of sites, these are the in terms of municipalities.
And these are here. Mr. President, regarding the last question of the distinguished minority leader, so we've mentioned already the 1,634 localities broken down into 1,489 municipalities and 145 cities. That can be further broken down into 13,024 sites. And of those 13,000 sites, 3,000 or so are plazas and parks, 677 are public libraries, 1,800 approximately are public elementary schools, 2,688 are public high schools, 682 are
All of that
state-
is in addition to? Or are we talking about the same number?
It's the same, Your Honor.
Huh?
We are just breaking it down
No,
further.
I agree. But because for today, you already have in certain public parks, certain high schools.
Yes. It
So
will be in addition to,
In
that
addition
case.
to yan.
Yes, Mr.
Huh?
President. Yes.
Okay. And then please continue.
So state universities and colleges would be 682 in response to the specific concern of the distinguished minority
Will
leader.
all 112 SUCs have it?
All 112 SUCs? Hindi siguro, no? Would you have an estimate of number of SUCs? Yes, yes. So, but I guess his question is of the 112, ilan ang matamaan? They're retrieving the data as to how many of the 112 SUCs would be covered, Mr. President. But if I may also continue, the rural health units, 2,191, and 86 government hospitals. We await the figure.
Okay. Could
as
we
to
have a
the SUCs.
breakdown also of those government hospitals and then the SUCs? You know, I think that they should be in all 112 SUCs at least.
I agree with, to really maximize the benefits
The
and
benefits, yes.
to those who need it most, and really achieve some kind of synergy because the students' learning would be enhanced, Mr. President. I totally agree with the distinguished minority leader.
Okay. So we will await the information or all this data. Now, Mr. President, I know that the hour is late and I was requested by the majority leader as well if we could break for lunch, and I didn't want to break for, I still have many more questions.
Mr. President, perhaps we could ask the DITCT to coordinate with your office to fast track the process today because the goal of the chamber is to pass it today. So if that's all right with you, we'll ask them to coordinate with your office.
Sure. I have no objection to that, Mr.
So what is the pleasure of the gentleman? Do we terminate the interpellation with the direction, with the directive to the DICT staff to sit down with Senator Recto in his office and provide Senator Recto with the information that he needs without going through the interpellation? Is that okay with Senator Recto?
That's fine with me, Mr. President. But if I may just have one last question.
Please proceed.
Of the 1.8, magkano yung MOE ninyo in 2017 without the carryover? Almost all, di ba? Okay. Magkano doon ang pupunta sa Global Smart?
Well, if we use the same formula approximately earlier of 10 to 20%,
How much is communication?
Because you'll be buying bandwidth from them too, di ba?
Communications, kasi pati yung Wi-Fi connectivity, kasama yun. How much would go to Globe and Smart? But how much will?
Mr. President, just a manifestation while we're waiting for the answer to these questions. You know
Say
what?
70%, Mr. President.
70%.
About 70%.
So only 30% for the last mile. Yung
Sorry.
magdi-deliver sa baba. 70% goes to the upstream.
Yes, yes.
Okay. All the more we should make those investments, Mr. President.
Absolutely, I totally agree, Mr. President, and I thank the gentleman
Yeah.
for supporting the
So there are other
department.
questions, like I said, I'd like to ask maybe when they come visit us in the office. No? Halimbawa, just to give an example, just for the record, no? So ilan computers ang bibili ng gobyerno next year? At magkano
Is
yun?
it just the
Ano yung
department or
role
the
ng
whole government,
DICT?
Mr.
The whole
President?
government.
The whole government.
Kasi may programa rin sa e-government di ba?
Unfortunately, they don't have the data. They would have to get it from DBM, Mr. President. Because unlike before where it was centralized, it's been downloaded to each agency already.
Okay, well, let's try to find out later. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Yeah.
All
Thank you,
right, with
distinguished
the
minority leader.
concurrence of Senator Recto, who has the floor, we will now terminate the period of interpellation on the budget of the Department of Information and Communication Technology. However, the officials of the DICT are directed to see Senator Recto at a mutually convenient time in his office in order to explain a number of items which Senator Recto would have asked on the floor. So with that, Mr. Majority Leader?
Yes, on behalf of the Majority Floor Leader, Mr. President, there being no other senators who've made reservations to interpolate the budget of the DICT, I move that we close interpellation and consider the budget of the Department of Information, Communication Technology, and all its attached agencies as deemed submitted for the body's consideration.
An objection, hearing none, so submitted.
And I move, Mr. President, to have a break for lunch until, suspended until 2:30 in the afternoon.
Okay,
I so
okay,
move.
before we act on the Majority Leader's motion, the next department will be the Department of Transportation.
That is correct, Mr. President.
And the sponsoring chairman is the chairperson of our Finance Committee, Senator Ligarda. We suspend the session for lunch until 2 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr. President. So moved.
Suspended until 2 o'clock.
Yes.
2:30 naman ang labat natin yan dito. 2:30 naman yan. Make it